Namaste, and welcome to Awaken Living with Nibodhi. Today we're discussing something that's really foundational in our growth, in our spiritual evolution, and in our emotional intelligence, our emotional maturity, and even in the way we relate to others. I want to discuss accountability and redefine what accountability is and what it means to really be accountable. And this isn't a heavy conversation. It's not a shame-soaked conversation where we're pointing the finger at someone. It's really about living a more awakened life. It's a form of accountability that's rooted in truth and in empathy and compassion so that our nervous system can go into a state of homeostasis, into that parasympathetic state of relaxation, so we can live with more awareness. And it takes courage to do so. So the courage to grow willingly, we have to be accountable for where we're not growing willingly, where we're not showing up 100%. So let's take a breath together. Deep inhalation. Hold it for a second. Relax the shoulders, relax the jaw, and slowly exhale. And we're going to have a conversation that hopefully we can transform every relationship we have, especially the one with ourselves. So the first thing is to really look at what accountability really means. So much of the time when people hear accountability, they think, who's at fault? Who messed up? Who's wrong? Who do we need to blame? But real accountability isn't about blame at all. It's literally about awareness. The definition of accountability is the obligation to accept responsibility for one's actions, one's decisions, and the outcome of those actions and decisions. It involves being answerable to others, taking ownership of our duties, and having the integrity to acknowledge and correct mistakes. This can apply to individuals, to groups, to institutions, and it can apply in workplaces, especially where it means taking initiative and completing tasks at an expected high standard. But it also is in relationship to our spouse, to our family, to our community. And I recently heard something that kind of struck me. It said, accountability is the account of everything that happened, not the account of who's wrong, but just the account of the full picture, looking at the entire ecosystem, looking at the entire biosphere, the context, the nervous systems involved, the samskaras or the patterns involved, the karmas involved, and the pressures and the histories and all the unspoken dynamics influencing each moment, each situation, each person involved. Because the reality is we're like pack animals. We're relational beings. We need community. We need to relate. We got very depressed. We had a lot of mental illness during the pandemic, when we isolated ourselves. We need to be in a biosphere with other people. We need to be in relationship with other people. We operate best inside of these systems, whether they're family systems or communities or workplaces or cultures, because it's these things that shape us, that shape our personality, that shape the ego structures and the dissolution of the ego structures. So whatever it is, we are relational beings, and we have to have relationship. No one is independent. We depend on everything. We depend on the earth. We depend on the person bringing the gas to the gas station. Literally, we're interdependent. So when something happens, we're not an isolated individual making a random choice in some vacuum. We're not floating alone in the emptiness of deep space. There's always a lot of factors involved. It's like a web that connects. Webs can also bind. And so we have to look at how the web is spun. But there's this web of factors, our conditioning from childhood onwards, our emotional patterns, and most of these things did start in childhood. So the conditions, the emotional patterns, the childhood wounds, the unhealed traumas, our cellular biology, just the energy, the interdynamic energy in the room, power dynamics in the room. And like it or not, there's unspoken agreements that holds everything together. So if we are going to live an awakened life with awakened accountability, we have to ask a fundamental question. What is the full truth here? Not just what is the comfortable truth, or not just what is the convenient truth. It's what is the full truth here. And it's a practice that takes a lot of courage. It means admitting we messed up and that we have faults, and taking accountability means we're willing to look at those and work on them. And that is truly a practice of maturity. It's a practice of stepping into maturity, both in emotional intelligence and in spiritual intelligence, because it's to our benefit to be awake. It's to our benefit to be accountable for who we are, because we can only be accountable for ourselves. And in that we can develop a practice of seeing ourselves and each other a little more clearly, and having empathy for ourselves, for our inner child, for our 5-year-old self who didn't get their needs met. And that's why we're acting up. But now we're an adult, so we can take responsibility for that. And in that responsibility, we have to understand that there's a difference between hurt and harm. And it's huge. It's really, really huge to understand that, because in a world where everything gets amplified, where every conflict is headline news, and where every nervous system is already way overstimulated, we have forgotten to a large extent how to distinguish between being hurt and being harmed. So what being hurt is when something touches a wound. And that's usually an emotional or psychological wound. I'm not talking about like a scratch on your arm. It's an internal wound. So the hurt is when something in the present moment touches a wound. It's activating an old memory, an old pattern. It triggers something inside of us. And being hurt can be really painful. It doesn't mean someone has done something damaging to our well-being. And there's a concept called intrinsic memory, where something in the present moment triggers a memory that happened 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever amount of years ago, that the reaction to the current situation is exponentially higher than it needed to be or should have been, because it hit on that thing that happened so long ago, that deep internal hurt, that deep internal pattern. So it's something that's activating that old wound. Harm is when real injury happens, whether it's emotional or physical or somatic or spiritual. It's real injury in the real present moment. And harm leaves a much deeper imprint than hurt, because that's in the present moment creating a lasting impact for the future. And it's affecting the nervous system now in a way that really requires repair and healing. And this distinction really matters, because our reactions are very different depending on which one of these we're dealing with, if we're dealing with the hurt or if we're dealing with the harm. And so if we are constantly confusing hurt with harm, we overact, we react. And reaction perpetuates the karma. Reaction is we're reacting based on something that happened already. And so if we can respond, our ability to respond, responsibility, then we can take accountability. But if we confuse the hurt and harm, not only are we reacting or overreacting, we're shutting down. That's another major component. We shut down. Or we may insist that the other person repairs with us when it's not actually appropriate. It's not actually needed. So we need to distinguish very clearly in ourselves what is harm and what is hurt. We may minimize something serious if we're not doing this, or we'll overlook the need for true repair or restoration when it's required. So awakened accountability means leaning into what really is happening, learning to pause, learning to ask what's going on here. Is this hurt or is this harm? What is being activated in me? What is actually happening right now? Am I actually in danger right now? Is there an actual threat? What actually needs attention? What actually needs healing? So distinguishing between hurt and harm is absolutely essential. Figuring that out, this one question can prevent years and years and years of unnecessary conflict, and it can open a doorway to deep, deep intimacy, first and foremost with ourself, with our God self, our divine self. And it can also open the doorway to our own realization, to our own clarity, our own self-understanding. And then in that, we can bring that into relationality in all the relationships, whether it's with your intimate partner, your spouse, your children, or your boss at work. And that's powerful. That's really powerful if we can do that. Imagine a world where our feedback wasn't something we fear or avoid, or we're waiting for until everything explodes. Imagine that we live in a world, a culture, our families, our workplace, our relationships, our community, where we have a feedback loop that flows like clear water, that flows like a beautiful mountain stream. In that, what happens is we're no longer waiting for healing. We're healing in the present moment. We don't wait for resentment to build up. We become people who feel safe to speak when something is happening. If we can do this, like, we can actually have leaders that are actively asking for our input rather than assuming what they think they know. We actively ask for input rather than assuming silence means everything is fine. We can really learn to speak in a way that the heart can be felt, and what is actually behind the surface can come to the surface for looking at. I'm very excited to share with you Real Mushrooms, the sponsor of the Awakened Living podcast. I use their mushrooms every single day because they've genuinely changed my life. I trust them because they have 50 years of expertise and use 100% organic mushrooms, 0 grains, 0 fillers, which are found in most common mushroom products on the market. They use just real, organic, clinically tested mushrooms. Every morning, I use lion's mane to sharpen my thinking. I use cordyceps to give me the clean energy I need for the day. I use chaga to strengthen my immune system. And when stress hits, and it does, I use reishi to bring me back to center. With their products, you actually feel the difference. Through the end of March, Real Mushrooms gives Awakened Living with Nibodhi podcast listeners 25% off their entire first order. Use the code AWAKEN25 at checkout to get 25% off your first purchase. You can find their link in the show notes or visit nibodhi.com/mushrooms to get yours today. So, in the heart of maintaining that kind of healthy relationship with ourselves and within the community, within the family, asking regularly ourselves, how am I doing? We have to do self-inquiry, what the Vedas call Atma Vichari. We have to look at ourselves, how am I doing? That's taking accountability, examining how I'm actually doing. And we can create multiple ways to communicate honestly. We can journal, we can have men's groups, we can have women's groups, we can have community circles with elders. And we want to really, in that, we welcome those difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. We want people to hold us accountable. We want mirrors to call us out when we're not in alignment. And we should normalize course correcting long before problems grow exponentially. We should be able to have tools within our society, within our family structures, within our community to course correct when something's wrong. In many Native American traditions, if a child or a youth or even adult is doing something that's harmful, the elders, they're not to blame. They're not blamed. The elders take it upon themselves. They say, how did we not teach them the ways of Great Spirit? How did we not teach them the ways of the good red road? And so then the elders, they'll fast, they'll pray, they'll counsel. Okay, and then they call a circle and the person is not blamed. They're not judged. They're not made to be wrong. The elders take responsibility and take affirmative action, take restorative justice action to course correct any problem before it becomes exponential. And, really, most people don't blow up because of one event. That's not a normal situation. If one event happens, there's not a major crisis. There's not a reaction. Most relational crises happen because small ruptures are accumulating over and over and over again until one person finally collapses under the weight of what they've been holding. The straw that broke the camel's back. The straw wasn't really the issue. It's all the other weight that had been there. So maybe we can develop a culture that values feedback. Maybe we can develop a culture that keeps us connected, honest, and humble, that keeps our relationships, first and foremost with ourselves, alive and of significant importance. And in that, we have something that's going on right now that's really, I see, both hurtful and harmful, and that's the cancel culture. And we need to really make a distinction between calling in and calling out and canceling, because canceling is really dangerous. It doesn't allow anyone accountability. It doesn't allow anyone to be wrong. It doesn't allow anyone to be human. But calling in and calling out are different things. This is really important. Calling in happens inside of a container, inside of a relationship, inside of a community that values each other. It's intimate, and it's what it's saying is, hey, can we talk about something that's on my heart, that's on my mind? It requires, though, that we feel safe. It requires that we trust the person we're in relationship with. It requires being established in a caring relationship, and it honors that bond of that relationship. That's calling in. When calling out happens, our safety is at risk. We don't feel safe when someone's just calling us out. And it essentially means that the conversations have failed and some kind of urgent intervention is needed. We need urgent transparency is needed, because the power structures are, whatever it is, in between two individuals or a family or a group, are basically making direct dialogue impossible. So calling out, while it's not inherently aggressive, it's not the most compassionate thing we can do. It's not compassionate to ourselves. It's not compassionate for the others. It's not taking the collective into consideration or integrity. It's basically, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's no other way. So calling out, calling in is a privilege in relationship. Calling out is, I don't know, maybe it's a necessity of boundaries. It could be seen like that. But we have to understand, what is it actually doing for the moment? Awakened accountability means discerning, what does this moment call for? There may be a point where calling out is necessary to create a healthy boundary so we can return to safety. But when the relationship is healthy, calling in is a more coherent way of dealing with a situation. And really, councils of elders are so valuable. And so many of the traditions, that's not really going on anymore. So this is wisdom when we have a council of elders. In Hawaiian culture and Native American culture, in ancient Vedic culture, there were elders, and they would reflect the truth. And it's basically surrounding yourself. If there's not counsel in the community, make a council of friends who you trust. A group of friends, surround yourself with a group of people who will always tell you the truth. And the truth may not always be flattering. It may not be soft. It's not going to be curated. If they love you and you're out of integrity, you're harming or hurting someone, something, yourself, you want them to tell you the truth. You want the kind of truth that's going to wake you up, that's going to keep you humble, that's going to keep you aligned with your goals in life. And even the leaders, the elders, need this. Elders need reflection too. Everyone needs this. Every leader in the community needs this. Every partner needs this. Every seeker on the spiritual path, every teacher, every human being needs someone or many someones to tell us the truth, to mirror to us what's going on. And that's actually the beauty of a true spiritual relationship, to hold up a mirror to the other person so we can see who we're not, to see how far we haven't come so we can know where we need to go. It's not easy to look in the mirror and see that, but it's necessary. So ask yourself, who are the people in your life who will lovingly interrupt your illusions, your delusions? Who's going to call you out? Do you have someone in your life who will call you out? Do you have many people in your life? And do you have someone you trust enough to gently dismantle your defensiveness? if the answer is no to either of these, find someone who's willing to do that. Who is going to call forward your highest self when you're stuck, when you regress into the old patterns, when you're tempted to go to the addictive patterns? Who do you have that's going to call you out for that? Because they're not calling you out to punish you, to condemn you. They're calling you out because they love you and they want you functioning in your highest self. They see your highest potential. So surround yourself with people who are honest, not harsh, not shaming, but profoundly and deeply honest. Because ultimately, truth is a high form of love. And love, when offered as truth, sets us free. It's a form of self-liberation, right? So accountability, real accountability, is not punishment. It's not blame. It's not shame. It's not perfection. Real accountability becomes the willingness to face the truth and to differentiate the difference between hurt and harm, and then ultimately to create a culture where feedback is welcome, and to discern when to call in and when to call out, and to surround ourselves with people who speak the truth to us with love, with absolute love and absolute truth. Again, this is a path that requires a lot of courage. It's a path that requires presence. It's a path of awakened living. But to live an awakened life, we need to face ourselves. We need to face ourselves with courage and presence. And we need people to help us do that. We're not alone. Remember, we're tribal, we're communal. So I hope this conversation gave you some framework to help you look at your relationships, to look at the relationship first and foremost with yourself, and then with your partnerships, your intimate partner, your intimate partnerships, your family, your friendships, your community, your employment. Look at all of it with a greater clarity and a greater compassion. And I hope that there's something here that inspires you to seek the truth of yourself a little more gently, to hold yourself accountable and to hold others accountable without losing heart, without losing the empathy and compassion. And also to hold ourselves accountable without losing our value and our self-worth. This isn't judge, blame, condemn hour. It's love, serve, awaken. So I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful we're sharing this conversation together. And I pray that every breath you take helps us closer to awakening, to stay open, to stay connected, and that our hearts are filled with love in every thought, word, and action. And if this talk today was inspiring for you, please subscribe, please rate, please review this conversation, please review this podcast, and share it with anyone who you think can be of service to this, who can be of value to this. And let's keep this conversation going one episode at a time. Namaste.